The kick connected with a sickening thud. It was a sound John Creed knew too well. The sound of bone and cartilage yielding to brute force. He had heard it in the dust-choked alleys of Fallujah and the frozen mountains of Afghanistan. He did not expect to hear it here, in the manicured silence of a small-town cemetery. The German shepherd let out a sharp cry, a yelp of pure agony that cut through the placid afternoon air like a shard of glass. The dog, Shadow, stumbled sideways, his leg folding at an unnatural angle. He tried to get up, his loyalty overriding the pain, but collapsed again onto the damp grass. A girl screamed. Her name was Lily. She was 16 years old, all sharp angles and quiet fear. A girl trying to become invisible in a world that refused to let her. She was on the ground, her backpack torn open, its contents scattered like confetti around her. Standing over her was a boy, Caleb Thorne, whose face was a mask of sneering entitlement. His friends flanked him, laughing. "Stupid mutt!" Caleb spat, turning his attention from the wounded dog back to the girl. He grabbed a fistful of her hair, yanking her head back. "You and your flea-bitten dog need to learn some respect." Lily's eyes were wide with terror, tears tracing clean paths through the grime on her cheeks. She did not beg. She did not plead. She just stared, her spirit retreating deep inside where he could not reach it. John Creed watched from the shade of an old oak tree, 100 yards away. He had come here for peace. He had come to visit the grave of a man he had served with, a man who had died so that places like this could remain peaceful. His own dog, a retired military working dog named Zeus, sat calmly at his heel, but the fur on his neck was rigid. Creed had been trying to leave the war behind. For 5 years, he had been trying. He moved to this quiet town, bought a small house, and tried to forget the man he used to be, the man who solved problems with controlled, precise violence. But the war never really left. It was in the tremor in his hands when the silence got too loud. It was in the cold sweat that woke him at 0300 every morning, and it was in the instinct that now screamed at him from the deepest part of his soul. Protect. He saw the bystanders, a couple walking their poodle who quickly crossed the street, a groundskeeper who suddenly found the far hedge intensely interesting. No one moved. No one spoke. They were afraid. Creed knew that fear. He had seen it in the eyes of villagers who knew that helping the Americans would get them killed after the sun went down. This was a different kind of occupation, an occupation of wealth and influence. Caleb raised his hand to strike the girl again. That was the end of it. Creed did not run. He moved with a liquid economy of motion that belied his size. He covered the 100 yards in a smooth, ground-eating stride that was utterly silent. The boys never saw him coming. His voice was not loud. It was low, calm, and carried the weight of tombstones. Let her go. Caleb Thorne froze, his hand still raised. He turned, his face a mixture of surprise and annoyance. He saw a man who looked like he had been carved from granite. Tall, broad-shouldered, with eyes that were a flat, cold gray. Eyes that had seen things Caleb Thorne could not imagine in his worst nightmares. "Who the hell are you?" Caleb demanded, his bravado a thin shell. Creed ignored the question. His gaze was locked on Caleb's hand, still tangled in Lily's hair. "I said," Creed repeated, his voice dropping another octave, "let her go, now." There was no anger in his voice. There was something far worse. There was a promise. Caleb's friends shifted nervously. They were predators, but only when the prey was weak. This man was not weak. With a final contemptuous shove, Caleb released Lily. She scrambled backward, pulling herself toward her whimpering dog. Whatever, Caleb sneered, trying to save face. We were just having fun. He looked Creed up and down. You have no idea who you're messing with. Creed took one more step forward. He did not need to raise his voice. He did not need to make a threat. His presence was the threat. Get out of here, he said. It was not a suggestion. The boys backed away, their swagger gone, replaced by a sullen resentment. They muttered threats as they retreated, but their words were hollow. They got into an expensive sports car parked at the curb and sped away, leaving a cloud of exhaust and silence in their wake. Creed knelt. He did not look at the girl first. He went to the dog. He ran his hands gently over the German shepherd's body. They were trained hands, hands that knew the architecture of muscle and bone. He felt the break in the dog's rear leg. It was clean, but it was bad. The dog, Shadow, licked his hand, his tail giving a weak thump against the ground. Only then did Creed turn to the girl. She was huddled over, her arms wrapped around her knees, trying to make herself small. Are you hurt? He asked. His voice was softer now, the coldness replaced by a quiet concern. She shook her head, not looking at him. My dog, she whispered. His leg is broken, Creed said, his tone matter of fact. We need to get him to a vet. Can you stand? She nodded, slowly pushing herself to her feet. She was shaking. Creed carefully scooped the injured dog into his arms. Shadow weighed a good 80 pounds, but Creed carried him as if he were a child. He started walking toward his truck, parked on the other side of the cemetery. Come on, he said gently. Lily hesitated for only a second before scrambling to gather her scattered books. She followed him, a small, silent shadow behind a man who had suddenly become a shield against the world. He did not ask her what happened. He did not ask for details. He knew what had happened. He had seen it 1,000 times in 1,000 different places. The strong preying on the weak, the entitled abusing the vulnerable. He had just hoped he was done fighting that war. At the veterinary clinic, the diagnosis was what he expected. A severe fracture. It would require surgery, pins, a long recovery. The vet, a kind woman named Dr. Evans, looked at the bill and then at Lily's frayed clothes. I'll take care of it, Creed said before the vet could even speak. He pulled out a worn leather wallet and placed a credit card on the counter. He did not look at the amount. It did not matter. While they waited for Shadow to be prepped for surgery, he bought Lily a bottle of water from a vending machine. They sat in the sterile waiting room, the silence broken only by the hum of the fluorescent lights. He does that a lot, Lily finally said, her voice barely audible. Creed looked at her. Caleb, she clarified. He bothers people, especially me. Why? She shrugged, staring at the linoleum floor. His father is Marcus Thorne. He owns the mill, owns most of the town, really. Caleb thinks that means he can do whatever he wants. Creed nodded slowly. He knew the type. Men who confused power with honor. Men who believed money could buy anything, including justice. Does anyone ever stop him? Creed asked. A bitter, humorless laugh escaped Lily's lips. Stop him. The principal gives him awards. The police give him warnings. Everyone is afraid of his father. She finally looked up, her eyes meeting his. They were old eyes in a young face, filled with a weariness that broke his heart. Thank you, she said, for what you did. No one has ever done that before. Creed looked at this girl, this child who was being forced to carry a burden no child should bear. He saw the ghosts of all the other innocents he had failed to protect, the faces of children in villages he could no longer find on a map. He made a decision. It was not a conscious thought. It was a reflex, an activation of a code that had been etched into his soul by fire and loss. He leaned forward, his expression serious, his voice low and steady. "This ends," he said. It was a statement of fact. "He will not touch you again. He will not speak to you again. This campaign of his is over." He saw a flicker of hope in her eyes, quickly extinguished by years of disappointment. "You can't," she whispered. "You don't know them." Creed held her gaze. "I promise you," he said. 3 words, a solemn vow. He had made promises like this before, on blood-soaked ground, to dying men. He had never broken one. He would not start now. His phone rang later that evening. It was an unknown number. He answered. "Is this John Creed?" The voice was smooth, cultured, and coated in a thick layer of arrogance. "Who is this?" Creed asked, already knowing the answer. "This is Marcus Thorne. I believe you had an unfortunate encounter with my son today." "That's one word for it," Creed replied, his voice flat. Thorne chuckled, a dry, unpleasant sound. "Listen, Mr. Creed. My son can be, high-spirited. He's a teenager. I'm sure you understand. I'd like to smooth this over. I've been told there was a veterinary bill. I'm prepared to cover that, of course, and to add a little extra for your trouble. Let's say $10,000. For you to forget this whole unfortunate incident ever happened." Creed was silent for a moment. He looked out his window at the darkening woods. "I'm not for sale," he said. The bonhomie in Thorne's voice vanished instantly. "I think you misunderstand your position here, Mr. Creed. You are new to this town. You don't know how things work. I am offering you an easy way out. I suggest you take it. And I suggest you teach your son some manners," Creed countered, "and keep him away from that girl." Now Thorne's voice was cold, menacing. "You are making a grave mistake. You have no idea what you are starting. I own this town. The police, the courts, they all work for me. You are one man. You will be crushed." Creed felt a familiar calm settle over him, the cold, clear focus that came just before the storm. "You're the one who doesn't understand," Creed said, his voice a whisper of steel. "You think your money makes you strong. You're wrong. You're about to find out what a real mistake looks like." He hung up the phone. The war had come home. The next morning, Creed drove Lily and her mother, a tired but resolute woman named Maria, to the police station. He had explained the situation to Maria the night before. She had cried, not from fear, but from gratitude that someone finally was willing to stand with them. The station was a small brick building that smelled of stale coffee and disinfectant. The desk sergeant, a heavy-set man with a pasty face and bored eyes, listened to their story with a practiced air of disinterest. He did not write anything down. "So," the sergeant said, leaning back in his squeaky chair, "your daughter got into a disagreement with the Thorne boy, and a dog got hurt." "He assaulted her," Creed stated, his voice level. "It was unprovoked. There were witnesses." The sergeant sighed, as if this was the greatest inconvenience of his day. "Mr. Thorne's son? Look, Caleb can be a handful. Boys will be boys. I'm sure he didn't mean any real harm. Maybe your daughter should be more careful about who she antagonizes." Creed placed his hands flat on the counter, his knuckles white. "Are you going to take a report? Or not?" The sergeant's eyes narrowed. He looked at Creed's military bearing, the disciplined set of his jaw. "We'll look into it," he said dismissively. "Don't call us. We'll call you." Creed knew a dead end when he saw one. They walked out into the bright sunlight, the injustice of it hanging in the air. "I told you," Maria said, her voice trembling with frustration. "They won't do anything. They never do." "He's one man," Creed said, more to himself than to her. "The system may be compromised, but he's just one man." But Marcus Thorne was more than a man. He was an institution. The next stop was the school principal's office. Principal Thompson was a man who smiled with his teeth, but not his eyes. He listened patiently, his hands steepled on his large oak desk. "The Thorne family are great benefactors to this school," Thompson said smoothly after they had finished. "They funded our new gymnasium. Caleb is an excellent student, a star athlete. Lily, well, she's a bit of a loner. Perhaps there was a misunderstanding." "He broke her dog's leg," Creed said, his patience wearing thin. "An unfortunate accident, I'm sure," Thompson replied, his smile unwavering. "I'll have a word with Caleb, but I would advise Lily to let this go. Making accusations against a family like the Thornes can have consequences." The consequences began that night. It started online. A series of anonymous posts on the town's social media page, accusing Lily of being a troublemaker, of lying, of provoking Caleb. Old, unflattering photos of her were posted. Vicious rumors were spread. Her small world was being systematically poisoned. The next morning, they woke up to find the tires on Maria's car slashed. Creed saw it first. He had spent the night on their couch, refusing to leave them alone. He stood on the porch, looking at the 4 flat tires, and felt that cold rage begin to simmer. This was a classic intimidation tactic. Isolate the target. Make them feel helpless. He called a tow truck and paid for new tires. He said nothing, but his silence was more eloquent than any words. The following afternoon, Caleb Thorne and his friends cornered Lily as she walked home from the bus stop. Creed was following at a distance, a ghost they never saw. He watched from behind a line of trees as they blocked her path. They did not touch her this time. They just stood there surrounding her, their presence a physical threat. "My dad said to tell you to stop," Caleb said, his voice low and menacing. "He said your new friend can't protect you forever." He took a step closer. "This is your last warning. Drop it, or next time, it won't be your dog that gets its leg broken." They laughed and walked away, leaving her standing alone, trembling on the sidewalk. Creed waited until they were gone before he approached. He did not say, "I told you I would protect you." He did not need to. His failure was a cold weight in his gut. He had underestimated their arrogance, their brazenness. That night, a brick crashed through the living room window. Wrapped around it was a note, printed in block letters. "We know where you sleep." Maria screamed. Lily sobbed. Creed picked up the brick. He unwrapped the note. He read the words, and something inside him finally broke. Not his spirit, not his resolve. The leash. The leash he had kept on the man he used to be. It snapped. He had tried to do this the right way. He had tried to use the system. But the system was broken, bought and paid for. Marcus Thorne was right. He owned this town. So Creed decided he would have to build a new system. He went into the spare room he was using and pulled out a satellite phone from the bottom of his duffel bag. It was a relic from his old life, a connection to a world Thorne could not touch. He dialed a number from memory. It rang twice before a familiar voice answered. the connection crisp and clear. "Who's dead?" the voice asked without preamble. "Not yet, Reaper," Creed said. "It's John." There was a pause on the other end, then a low whistle. "Creed. Man, it's been a long time. I thought you went off the grid to become a hermit." "Something like that," Creed said. "Listen, I need a favor." "Name it," Reaper said without hesitation. For men like them, that was the only answer. "I'm in a small town called Northwood. I've run into a local tyrant, a man named Marcus Thorne. He's got the local law and government in his pocket. He's terrorizing a family, a Gold Star family." The line went quiet for a moment. The term Gold Star family carried a sacred weight in their world. It changed the nature of the request from a favor to a duty. "What do you need?" Reaper's voice was all business now. "Everything you've got on him. Financials, communications, political connections. I need surveillance gear. Something small, untraceable. And I need eyes. I need to know everything he does, everyone he talks to." "Consider it done," Reaper said. "I'll get the tech team on it. We'll peel him like an onion. Gear will be on a dead drop by 0800 tomorrow. I'll text you the coordinates. You need bodies on the ground?" "Not yet," Creed said. "I want to keep the footprint small for now. But stay ready." "We're always ready, brother," Reaper replied. "Give 'em hell." Creed hung up. For the first time in days, he felt the tactical advantage shifting. Thorne had an army of corrupt officials and hired thugs. Creed had something better. He had his team. His next call was to a number he had gotten from a fellow veteran, a local journalist named Sarah Vance. She had a reputation for being fearless and relentless. She answered on the first ring. "Vance. My name is John Creed. I was given your number by a mutual friend. I need to talk to you about Marcus Thorne." He could hear the change in her breathing. "What about him?" she asked, her voice sharp with interest. "I have a new story for you," he said. "A victim who is willing to talk. And I'm going to get you the proof you need to print it." They met an hour later at an all-night diner on the edge of town. Sarah Vance was in her late 30s, with sharp, intelligent eyes that missed nothing. She carried a file folder that was at least 3 inches thick. She dropped it on the table between them. "Marcus Thorne," she said. "I've been trying to nail this guy for 5 years. Land grabs, environmental violations, political corruption, union busting. The man is a cancer, but every time I get close, my sources dry up, people get scared, accidents happen." "This time is different," Creed said. He told her about Lily, about Caleb, about the intimidation. Her expression hardened. "I've heard whispers," she said. "Rumors about his son, about other girls, but no one would ever go on the record. They were all paid off or scared into silence." "Lily will talk," Creed assured her, "and we're going to find the others." Sarah opened the file. It was a treasure trove of her investigation. Names, dates, financial records, sworn affidavits that were later recanted. It was a roadmap to Thorne's criminal empire. "There's a lawyer," she said, tapping a name on a piece of paper. "Frank Miller. He's a bulldog, ex-Marine. He hates guys like Thorne more than anyone I know. He tried to bring a class action suit against the mill a few years back for safety violations. Thorne's lawyers buried him in paperwork and bled him dry. He'd love another shot." Creed nodded. A journalist, a lawyer, and a SEAL team. The board was being set. The next day, the gear arrived as promised. In a waterproof Pelican case hidden in a hollow log were miniaturized cameras, listening devices, and a ruggedized tablet linked to a satellite network. Creed and Sarah with Frank Miller now on board, began their own operation. They worked out of a rented warehouse on the outskirts of town, turning it into a command center. Creed, using his old skills, placed the surveillance devices with surgical precision. A bug in Thorne's office, a camera overlooking his private driveway. He was a ghost, moving through the shadows of the town he was determined to save. The information began to flow, recordings of Thorne bribing the police chief, phone calls threatening a town councilman, financial records showing massive payoffs to shell corporations. It was all there. A web of corruption that was even deeper and darker than they had imagined. Meanwhile, Sarah and Frank began the delicate work of contacting the other victims. They found 3 other girls who had been harassed or assaulted by Caleb Thorne. Their families had all been silenced with non-disclosure agreements and large sums of money. At first, they were terrified. They refused to talk. But Frank Miller was persistent. He showed them that they were not alone. He explained that the NDAs were likely invalid if they were signed under duress. Slowly, painstakingly, they began to build a chorus of voices. The fear that had kept them silent for so long began to be replaced by a shared anger, a collective desire for justice. Marcus Thorne knew something was wrong. He could feel the ground shifting beneath his feet. He was a man who thrived on control, and for the first time, he was not in control. He doubled down on his intimidation. His men started following Sarah Vance. Frank Miller's office was broken into, his files tossed. But they were prepared. The real files were all digitized and stored on Reaper's secure servers. Thorne was getting desperate, and desperate men make mistakes. He decided he needed to eliminate the source of his problem, not Creed. Creed was a ghost he could not find. He targeted the one person he knew he could hurt. Lily. He decided to send a final, brutal message, one that would silence everyone forever. The attack came on a cold, moonless night. Lily was taking Shadow, now hobbling on a casted leg, for a short walk in her backyard. Maria was inside, on the phone with Frank Miller. 2 dark figures emerged from the woods that bordered their property. They were not boys this time. They were hard men, the kind of men Thorne kept on his payroll for jobs the police could not handle. Shadow sensed them first. He let out a low growl, placing his body between them and Lily. He was injured, but his protective instincts were as sharp as ever. One of the men laughed and kicked the dog's injured leg. Shadow collapsed with a cry of agony. Lily screamed. She turned to run, but the second man caught her. He clamped a hand over her mouth. She fought. She was no longer the timid, terrified girl from the cemetery. The last few weeks had forged a core of steel within her. She bit the hand over her mouth, drawing blood. She kicked and clawed and fought with everything she had. In the struggle, she raked her fingernails down the man's cheek, a deep, vicious scratch. His DNA was now under her nails, a piece of crucial evidence. But it was not enough. They were too strong. They overpowered her. They beat her, systematically, brutally. They did not stop until she was a broken, unmoving heap on the cold ground. "That's the message from Mr. Thorne," one of them grunted before they melted back into the woods. Creed was 2 miles away, reviewing surveillance footage, when he heard Maria's frantic scream over the open comms link he had given her. He was there in less than 3 minutes. He saw the scene under the harsh glare of the back porch light. Shadow, whimpering, trying to crawl to the motionless form of his girl, and Lily, lying so terribly still, her face swollen and bruised, her clothes torn. Something inside John Creed went utterly, terrifyingly cold. The rage was gone, burned away and replaced by something purer, harder, and infinitely more dangerous. A calm, absolute certainty. He knelt beside her, his fingers going to her neck. He found a pulse. It was weak, thready, but it was there. He scooped her gently into his arms and carried her to his truck, shouting at Maria to call 911 and meet them at the hospital. Hours later, he stood in the sterile hallway of the intensive care unit, looking through the glass at Lily's small form, lost in a sea of tubes and wires. Reaper had flown in and was standing beside him. "She has a concussion, 3 broken ribs, and a ruptured spleen," Creed said, his voice devoid of all emotion. "The doctors say she's lucky to be alive." Reaper looked at Creed's face. He had seen that look before. It was the look Creed got just before a mission went sideways, right before he did something that would be talked about in hushed tones for years to come. "What's the play, John?" Reaper asked quietly. Creed turned away from the window, his gray eyes like chips of ice. "We tried it by the book," he said. "We gathered evidence. We built a case. And this is the result." He looked at his friend. "The book is closed," he said. "The legal strategy is over. We end this. We end him. Tonight." Reaper nodded slowly. "What's the target?" "All of them," Creed said. "Thorne, his son, his hired muscle, the police chief. We expose them all. We burn his whole rotten empire to the ground." They went back to the warehouse. The rest of the team was already there, flown in on a private jet and assembled in less than 6 hours. They were ghosts, operators who did not officially exist. They were the instruments of Creed's final promise. The plan was audacious, it was dangerous, and it was going to happen in a very public forum. The next evening was the annual Founders' Day Gala, the biggest social event of the year in Northwood. Marcus Thorne was the guest of honor. He was scheduled to receive a philanthropic award from the mayor for his contributions to the community. It was the perfect stage. Reaper's tech specialist, a wizard known only as Oracle, had been working non-stop. He had taken the grainy security footage from a camera a quarter-mile away that had captured the assault on Lily. He had enhanced it, cleaned it up, cross-referenced it with satellite thermal imagery. It was undeniable. He had also synced it with the audio from the bug in Thorne's office, the audio of Thorne ordering the attack. "Do it tonight," Thorne's voice snarled from the speakers in the warehouse. "I want her broken. I want them all to see what happens when you cross me." The team listened in grim silence. The gala was held at the town's historic country club. The room was filled with the town's elite, all dressed in their finest, oblivious to the storm that was about to break. Marcus Thorne was on stage, smiling, accepting the applause. Sarah Vance, using her press credentials, was in the front row. Frank Miller was near the back, coordinating with a team of state troopers led by Officer Evans, the one incorruptible cop Creed had found. They were waiting outside, out of sight. Creed was not there. He was somewhere else, orchestrating. As the mayor handed Thorne the award, the lights in the ballroom suddenly went out. The crowd gasped. A single spotlight came on, illuminating the large projection screen behind the stage. The security footage began to play. There was no sound at first, just the grainy, horrifying images of 2 men brutally beating a teenage girl. The crowd murmured in confusion and horror. Then the audio kicked in. It was not the audio from the video. It was the crystal-clear recording from Thorne's office. "I want her broken. I want them all to see what happens when you cross me." The voice of Marcus Thorne echoed through the silent ballroom. The man on the screen, the smiling philanthropist, was replaced by the monster on the recording. Chaos erupted. People screamed, pointing at Thorne, whose face had gone chalk white. The doors at the back of the ballroom burst open, but it was not the police who entered. It was a single figure, walking slowly down the center aisle. It was Lily. She was in a wheelchair, pushed by her mother. Her face was a patchwork of bruises, a testament to Thorne's cruelty. But her eyes were clear and strong. She was no longer a victim. She was a witness. A path cleared for her as she approached the stage. The entire room was silent, watching her. She stopped at the foot of the stage and looked up at Marcus Thorne and his son, who stood frozen in shock. Her voice, when she spoke, was not loud, but it carried to every corner of the room. "I am not afraid of you anymore," she said. Then, from the audience, an older woman stood up. "He did this to my daughter too," she cried out, pointing at Caleb. "5 years ago, he paid us to be quiet." Another person stood, and another. A chorus of the silenced, finding their voice all at once. It was at that moment that the main doors opened again. Officer Evans, flanked by a dozen state troopers in full tactical gear, strode into the room. "Marcus Thorne," Evans announced, his voice booming. "You are under arrest for conspiracy, assault, and a list of other charges so long it'll take you till morning to read them." Troopers swarmed the stage, cuffing a stunned Thorne and his whimpering son. Other teams moved through the crowd, arresting the police chief, the mayor, and 2 councilmen implicated in the recordings. The takedown was swift, total, and brutally efficient. Justice, finally, had come to Northwood. The trials were a formality. The evidence was overwhelming. The recordings, the financial records, the testimony of a dozen victims. Marcus Thorne and his entire network were found guilty on all counts. The sentences were long. Life for Thorne and the men who attacked Lily. Decades for the others. They would never see the outside of a prison cell again. Months passed. The town began to heal. A new mayor was elected. A new police chief was appointed. The Thorne Mill was broken up under antitrust laws and sold to its employees. The shadow that had hung over the town for so long was finally gone. One afternoon, Creed was at the small farm he had bought just outside of town. He was working on a fence post when a car pulled up. It was the former desk sergeant, the one who had dismissed them that first day. He was no longer a cop. He looked older, diminished. "Mr. Creed," he said, twisting the brim of his hat in his hands. I wanted to apologize. I was a coward. I was afraid of him. What you did. You saved this town, and I'm sorry I wasn't brave enough to help." Creed looked at the man for a long moment. He saw not an enemy, but just another person who had been trapped in Thorne's web of fear. "Go be a better man," Creed said simply, and turned back to his work. He had found a new mission. With funding from some of his old teammates, he had started a foundation. He took in retired military working dogs, like Zeus, and paired them with veterans suffering from post-traumatic stress. He used the quiet discipline of the animals to help heal the hidden wounds of men like him. He was building something instead of breaking it. He was finding his own peace by giving it to others. The final quiet moment came on a warm summer evening. Creed was sitting on his porch swing, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. Zeus was lying at his feet. A car pulled into the driveway. It was Lily. She was driving now. She got out of the car, followed by Shadow, who ran with only the slightest hint of a limp. She had healed. The bruises were long gone. But more importantly, the fear in her eyes was gone, replaced by a quiet confidence. She was volunteering at the foundation, her gentle spirit a balm for both the men and the dogs. She sat down on the swing next to Creed. They did not speak for a while, just watched the day end. Shadow chased a firefly on the lawn. "I visited my dad's grave today," she said softly. Creed nodded. "I told him about you," she continued. "I told him that after he was gone, I thought there were no more heroes left in the world." She turned to look at him, her smile small but genuine. "I told him I was wrong." Creed looked at this resilient young woman, at the loyal dog playing in the twilight, at the peaceful country spreading out before him. The war was finally over. He was home. The storm had passed. And in the quiet after, there was peace.